It's Truth for Youth Week on AFR Talk.
Welcome back. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth right here on AFR Talk. Now, you've been listening to Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is the rights writer. He is also he is also featured on Floyd Reports, floydreports.com. And Ben, we talked a little about Dick Cheney, a wee bit, because he's getting all sorts of press because his new book is out. We now have shifted to President Obama because in every administration it seems that you're going to have people calling for the impeachment of the president from the opposition party. Yet when I look at what's going on today, I think laws are not being enforced, and the picking and choosing of laws to enforce with the Department of Justice. We also have executive agencies going outside their bounds to pursue things they could not get legislatively. And then we have military action where we're leading from behind in Libya, and we really don't know our true role, but I understand that we might have even had some advisors on the ground, so to speak. So, Ben, what is the requirement for impeachment?
The Constitution says the requirement for impeachment is high crimes and misdemeanors. And people instantly think that means he has to have committed some kind of a crime. In point of fact, that's not the way the Founding Fathers intended it. In fact, they made very clear in the deliberations during the Constitutional Convention that they were afraid if you set it only at that bar, there were many things that someone could do that would fall short of a crime, but that would harm the country immensely. So they struck the term misdemeanor or only high crime. And they ultimately said what was important was if someone is refusing to carry out the laws of the land, or someone is carrying out the laws of the land in a way that is contrary to the Constitution, then that person is impeachable. But ultimately, we have to remember it's a political act. It's up to Congress to determine whether someone has been acting in a manner that is against the Constitution and have the political courage to actually follow through and introduce articles of impeachment and find the political strength to get it through two houses of Congress, which is why we've seen precious little of that during the Obama administration. The Democrats, of course, were in solid majorities during most of the past 2 years, and now in the last year, they still control the Senate. So there hasn't been much in the way of courage there. The Obama administration has had one impeachable offense after another. You mentioned the war in Libya, which I think is the most blatant. The U.S. Constitution in Article 1 says Congress alone has the war-making power, which means if there's going to be a war, Congress has to declare it and take us from a state of peace into a state of war. The president then becomes commander-in-chief and directs the war, and he alone has that power. Instead, Barack Obama just said, we are going to go into a war with Libya, and then he violated the War Powers Resolution, which is somewhat dubious in its constitutionality. Frankly, some people say it takes away the president's power. I think, on the contrary, it gives the president too much power. But it says if the president has started a war, essentially, or put troops into harm's way, he has to get congressional authorization within 60 to 90 days, or he has to remove the troops. Obama said this action would take weeks, not months. His own Attorney General, Eric Holder, told him he was violating the War Powers Resolution, yet he continued to allow this to go on. American troops are still on the ground now, still firing drone rockets at people, still trying to overthrow the government, still trying to kill Muammar Gaddafi's family members. So there's no question we're in a state of hostilities, which is what the War Powers Resolution says one must get congressional authorization to permit or to continue. So this is certainly an impeachable offense. And then, as you alluded, this administration simply decides if it likes a law, if it passed, if it didn't pass, it will enforce it as though it did. If it didn't like a law, it'll pretend it didn't pass. So the administration's not enforcing the Defense of Marriage Act. It's not defending it in the courts, which, as we've said before, is actually good because the defense hurt the case more than anything else. But they are acting as though the DREAM Act had passed. They decided on the 18th, just last week, that they are not going to enforce the amnesty. They're going to allow amnesty for anyone who would have been covered by the DREAM Act and a whole broader category of people who weren't guilty of any great felony yet. So we've seen people who have committed traffic crimes and things like that be allowed to escape. and then they commit some terrible felony afterward, or they're involved in an accident that kills an American citizen when they shouldn't be in this country, and all of that's directly at the feet of Barack Obama.
Just to follow up with you on the Libyan portion, could people make the argument that President Bush should have been impeached? But as I understand, we have authorizations to use military force. Now, could you, because I know what people are saying, well, hey, why there was no declaration, there was no, so he's just doing what Bush did. Not really. Go.
No, not in the least. George W. Bush in 2002 sought and received a congressional authorization of war. Every Democrat who is running for president voted for the congressional authorization for the use of force in Iraq. And everyone knew that meant one day we were going to war with Iraq. It wasn't for a process. It was an authorization that we are going to have hostilities, we're going to introduce troops, and we're going to try and overthrow the government, which had been the policy since Bill Clinton was president. So he sought and obtained congressional authorization, even though it wasn't a declaration, as the Constitution actually says. He did get some sort of congressional authorization from both houses of Congress to go into Iraq. Barack Obama didn't even seek one until he had already violated the terms of the Constitution and the War Powers Resolution.
So, in essence, could you make the argument that he had to? It was a vital national security interest. He didn't have time to consult Congress?
Oh, he didn't cite national security in any way, shape, or form. He said that he was going in order to prevent a humanitarian crisis, that Muammar Gaddafi would wipe out his own people if he didn't intervene. But in point of fact, he had plenty of time to convene with the UN Security Council. He spoke with our allies in France and Britain, Germany, and other places, and he also spoke at the Arab League. So there's no question whatever that he had plenty of time to get congressional authorization if he wanted it. And in fact, everyone who's on the ground said there was never going to be a humanitarian crisis. This is war propaganda. Every war that we go into, they say that there will be a great humanitarian crisis if we don't get involved, and the people who are saying that are the people who want us fighting and killing alongside them.
Is there a humanitarian crisis in Syria right now? And for that matter, how about the Sudan with the persecution and the killing of Christians?
I was going to say, I mean, that's the one that's been going on for a very long time. We always turn blind eyes to humanitarian crises that don't affect our bottom line. It's what we did in Rwanda. It's what we've been doing in Sudan. When Christians are the ones who are persecuted, there's no lobby to stand up and say we need to intervene and to save these lives. Apparently, it's only when Muslims are involved that the lives rise to the level of deserving American protection.
Yeah, well, Ben, we do hear about them, though, and we are informed because there are people like you who are doing us all a great service by covering this. And I read an article from, I think it's 5 years ago, that you wrote on the Plame affair. And I got to tell you, what's so refreshing about you, Ben, is the fact that you document everything you say. And if I go into a debate or if I'm preparing for something, I'm going to consult Ben Johnson's work because I know that I'm not going to be caught flat-footed. It's not going to be something of speculation. He's going to say, here's the source, here's where I go, because Ben has respect for what he does and the field he's in, which is journalism, as well as he also can provide commentary. Every time you're on, I wonder why you just don't have the weekly segment. So we've got to lock it in, okay? Because we need you, buddy, and we appreciate you.
Anytime you want to ruin your show, I'm game.
Hey, buddy, have a great weekend. Enjoy, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Take care. God bless. That is Ben Johnson, the rights writer. I've known Ben for years, and it's funny because in this business, we'll call it, doing a midnight to 3 show or finding guests at different times and then developing relationships with these guests and getting to know them. You get to know their work and their mission and their desire. And Ben, across the board, has just been a solid guy.